Welcome to Fantasy OT. Let's talk about some must starts and must sits for week 2. To kick things off, let's talk about some must starts. Top in my list is Mike Evans. Evans had 6 receptions for 66 yards and a beautiful 28-yard touchdown last week. And I think he has a great chance to replicate that same success against Chicago at home this week. Chicago just gave up 3 touchdowns to Jordan Love. And I think Baker Mayfield surprised a lot of people last week. It's my expectation that Evans is going to play this entire year with a chip on his shoulder. He's upset about the fact that the Buccaneers didn't give him the contract extension he wanted, and he's out to prove that that was a huge mistake. We're talking about a guy that's going to be in the record books when it's all said and done. He's had 9 1,000-yard seasons to start a career and has averaged 9 touchdowns per season throughout his career. And I think he's going to be able to put those same numbers up again this year. In my mind, this week, he's going to act as the number 1 option again. He played 84% of the snaps last week, and I think there's little doubt he's going to be on the field that much again this week. Next up, Michael Pittman. I think Michael Pittman surprised a lot of people last week. He had 8 receptions on 11 targets for 97 yards and a touchdown. His touchdown was a screen pass he took 39 yards to the house. And I'm optimistic about him producing similarly this week against Houston on the road. Anthony Richardson ended up throwing the ball 37 times last week, and I don't think many people anticipated that. I think without Jonathan Taylor, this team is going to have to throw the ball to stay in games. They proved last week that they don't have much depth behind them. Deion Jackson proved to be lackluster, fumbling the ball twice and being very inefficient. And I know they're going to get Zach Moss back this week potentially. But even with that, I can't imagine that they're not going to have to throw the ball to stay in games. I think Pittman Jr. should continue to function as the top target for Richardson, and it seemed like Richardson relied on him the most. With Pittman playing 97% of the snaps, I would imagine he won't be coming off the field very much. He's also trying to earn a new contract. So my guess is he's going to be chasing stats as often as possible. Next up, Nico Collins. Nico Collins had 6 receptions for 80 yards to lead Houston in receiving last week. And I think some of this might have been a little inflated with John Mechie missing the game due to a hamstring. But I think even if Mechie's able to suit up this week, Collins' top spot is pretty secure. His biggest threat is probably Robert Woods, who had 10 targets last week, but Collins is the most talented receiver of the bunch. And I think this week, going up against the Colts, who gave up 241 passing yards last week, he has a great chance to produce again. Hopefully he can get in the end zone, but I think he's definitely someone you want to start. Next, Tyler Algier. Algier was kind of a surprise last week too. He played 56% of the snaps to Bijan Robinson 63, and he had 15 carries for 75 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns, which for Robinson owners, I'm sure that hurt. But I don't anticipate that continuing throughout the year. But Algier should definitely have standalone value. He also chipped in 3 receptions for 19 yards, which was a pleasant surprise. And I think if you're looking for a RB3 with RB2 upside, Algier is someone you want to plug into your lineup. He's going up against the Green Bay team at home that just gave up 122 yards on the ground to Chicago. And I think Arthur Smith is going to try to employ the same formula every single game if he can. Keep the ball out of Desmond Ridder's hands so he can't make mistakes, and run the ball as much as possible. Which is a great segue to talk about sits. Top in my sit list is Drake London. London played 90% of the snaps last week, which is great, but he only got 1 target, which he did not catch, and ended up putting up a bagel. And I think this is going to be a problem moving forward. Desmond Ridder only attempted 18 passes and threw for 115 yards. And like I just mentioned, I think Arthur Smith is going to try to grind out every game if he can. Ridder took 4 sacks last week, which doesn't help his cause at all. And I think when you have 2 talented and capable running backs like Atlanta does, there's no reason why they won't continue to use them. I think this week against Green Bay should be much of the same. The Packers only allowed 216 yards passing last week, so there's even more incentive for Atlanta to run. And I would imagine it's going to be the Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson show once again. Next, another Atlanta pass catcher you're going to want to sit is Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts didn't fare much better than Drake London. He had 2 catches on 3 targets for 44 yards, which led the team in receiving, but these type of stat lines are not going to get it done in fantasy. He only played 62% of the snaps, which was actually a little surprising, and I think the only pathway to success for him or London is if Atlanta falls into a huge hole, which may happen against Green Bay, but I think if they continue to run the ball the way they have, they should control the clock, making it unlikely that Pitts puts up any splash or boom performances. At this point, if you do have the option, I think Pitts is best left on your bench unless Atlanta can prove that they intend to pass the ball a little bit more. Moving right along, I think you should bench both Rams running backs, starting with Cam Akers. Cam Akers was really inefficient last week, getting 22 carries for 29 yards and salvaging his day with a touchdown. And Kyren Williams looked like the better back. While Cam Akers got more volume, he only played 35% of the snaps. So he looks like he's going to be ceding some work to Williams moving forward. This week, him and Williams are going up against the 49ers, who were tied with the Buccaneers for the fewest rushing yards allowed with 41 last week. And if the Rams want to have any chance at staying in this game, it's going to have to be through the air, where San Francisco's a little bit more vulnerable. But even then, I could see Akers being phased out or be put in the doghouse if he ends up being just as inefficient as he was last week. At this point, I think Akers is best left on your bench, especially for this week, unless you have no option. To briefly touch on Kyren Williams, he did have 15 rushes for 52 yards and 2 rushing touchdowns and also had 2 receptions. So he definitely was the better back of the two. He also played 65% of the snaps. So if you're really in a pinch at running back, he might be the better play at this point, but I would still leave him on your bench. This San Francisco rush defense is real. Their defense in general looks real. So if you have another option, I would definitely go that way. Lastly, Courtland Sutton. Courtland Sutton had 4 receptions on 5 targets for 32 yards and a touchdown, but it wasn't very promising. Considering Russell Wilson only threw for 177 yards, I don't like his odds of getting in the end zone or even producing like he did last week this week. He's going up against the Washington Commanders team that only allowed 132 passing yards last week. Granted, it was against Joshua Dobbs and the Arizona Cardinals, but this defense is still very formidable, and they should be able to lock down the pass catchers in Denver, especially given that there's not much behind Sutton. Denver just lost Greg Dulcich to a hamstring injury, and I think while it may be enticing in terms of the volume increase Sutton may get, I think with Wilson being where he's at in his career at this point, it's tough to trust any pass catcher in Denver. This team has definitely run first. They had 94 yards on the ground last week, and it seemed like they were really trying to get both Samaje Perine and Javonte Williams involved. My expectation is that Williams will only further become the focal point of this offense as he gets healthier. Those are my starts and sits for week 2. Thanks for tuning in. Please subscribe and let me know who you think we should start and sit in the comments below.